Any one factor. So I can compute any one factor that is damaging the economy and make a law to mitigate that one factor. And I don't need to consider any of the other factors.
What? That's the opposite of that's literally that is like the definition of like an awful.
So, for example,
if you make a model and you only include one variable, you exclude every other relevant variable.
Okay. Like if you're a social scientist worth your salt, you never do a univariate analysis.
Okay, well, so my first response to some of what Tom said, he compared the statistics between religious societies and non-religious societies. I don't think you can just draw a direct causation from the correlation that he referred to. I don't know which societies you're referring to exactly.
Why?
Well, because there's many variables that would differentiate a religious society versus a non-religious. Which give me two examples of countries you're comparing.
America and Sweden, Norway, Denmark, China, Japan.
Okay.
I mean, we could pick any of them.
Right.
Like
and
any like if I take all religious countries and all secular countries and compare the data, secular countries are better. Including China, including North Korea, including Russia. Well, Russia's actually majority Christian, but I can include all the bad ones too. We still win.
Okay. I feel like the issue I would have with that is how do you know that there are not other factors that are causing that difference in the statistics you mentioned?
Well, we agree that, as you mentioned in your opening, that religion is a software coding that resembles or encourages people to do certain things, right?
Sure.
So.
Sure, but like if I compare like Sweden to America, there's plenty of other factors other than self-reported religiosity that would contribute to the difference in the measures of well-being that you gave, right?
Yes, but all of those features would be things that are a result of the coding of the society that causes them to act in a particular way, right?
Not necessarily. You could have Sweden has a lot of oil reserves, for example.
Sure, so does Saudi Arabia, but it's not better off.
I agree, sure. Yes, that's my point. There's many different factors you can't lay it at the feet of religion alone.
So obviously there are many different factors, but the problem is that if we compare what are the best overall outcomes, it's disproportionately non-religious. Like if it was a non-influential factor, we would expect to see that the proportion of religious countries would also be in the top two. It's just not. They're just all secular, like by a huge margin.
Sure. Okay. Well, I think, and this will be an interesting road to go down, because I guess I would take issue with the degree to which self-reported religiosity is kind of an accurate measure for religion. So, like, I think most people watching this understand the term. Like, if I say politics is a religion, you understand what I mean by that, right?
Sort of, not really. But go back to what your original statement was. You said something like self-reported religiosity is not.
Yeah. So the reason I made the point about religion being the source code, like the command prompt level kernel code, where you have, and then you have culture built on top of that, is that every society evolved out of every culture revolved out of a religious tradition, and we still have remnants of that.
So technically, like the Puranas and Purahas they're non-religious, but every society evolved out of a non-religious society. Monkeys weren't religious initially, so it's more accurate to say we started as non-religious societies.
Well, but
religious ones. But what's your point? What point are you attempting to make?
My point is that whether or not, and this is, I guess, different from the argument I was going to take it down, but we can go here. You say societies are better off without my argument would be that you cannot escape the religious impulse that people have in any society. So if I say, for example, I don't believe in God or I'm not religious, if you still operate in a culture that was shaped by selection, which you agreed with, that selected for certain religious principles that are at the base of that culture, you can't escape those religious principles.
That doesn't make sense as an argument. So like if I say spears are good for society, well, like today, if we use spears, our militaries are going to lose. It would be terrible for our militaries to use spears. So wait.
Sure, it's not that simple,
so the fact that it was good, or that a society was built off one that used spears, doesn't mean that spears are today useful. So I agree that religion built some factors of society,
but the fundamental factors of society. So for example, like I mentioned in the opening statement, the idea that all people are created equal, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all people are created equal. My point is the only reason that that's self-evident is because the people who laid out those terms were ensconced in a Christian culture. Because
Well,
in no way is the fact that everyone is equal, that's not a self-evident rational claim.
Well, actually, those comes from the rationalists, not the religious people. In fact, from religion, not people are not actually equal, which is why the vast majority of the founding fathers weren't actually religious. You can take that up with Andrew Seidel in his book, but
Sure, I would definitely, take that up.
comes up from things prior to religion. Again, these principles predate religion. They're from secular nations. Confucianism has this, which doesn't have a god in it whatsoever. These principles that you're describing, religion is an offshoot of natural human psychology. And so the principles in religion are a reflection of human psychology.
I think
So your
I think
implication here that you're saying that religion built these things, like, no, these didn't come from religion. These came from human psychology, and they were just ensconced in religion,
yes,
or
but
written in religion.
I'm arguing that the religious impulse, religiosity, is inbuilt to human psychology, and my evidence for that would be that what I said, people treat politics as a religion. Everyone
No, I
watching
agree.
this.
I agree. So what's the point? So I agree that
So my point is the religious traditions that have been around long enough for selection to act against and survive contain within them a lot of useful information that we do not want to disregard too quickly. So if we say, like, we don't need Christianity anymore, it's like, okay, well, I don't know exactly what that means, but it would be like, okay, we're not going to respect any of the religious traditions that our culture is founded in. And with
just
that,
to clarify, I'm not seeing how that addresses my spear argument. So I agree there were many valuable
I think
aspects in religion.
the sphere argument is too simple of a metaphor for what I'm saying. Because
Well, no, so my argument here is that I agree that religion was good for some things, but now we have
sure.
better tools that can do all of those things that aren't religion. So
And
just
I would
like a
say that
spear
those
has been
tools,
replaced-
those tools are built, those cultural tools, because the spear is a physical tool, which is the problem with that metaphor. But the cultural tools are built on a religious platform, meaning at the base of any rational claim or any rational moral system, you have to make fundamental faith claims. And the faith claims
I'm totally lost right now. So what do you
Okay.
mean it's built on religion? So like,
So for example,
try to work with my analogy here with the spear.
Okay.
So obviously a gun.
I'm
is
telling
just
you
a-
the spear analogy is not
well,
not gonna
it
work.
works perfectly in your analogy that obviously we don't think a society is a literal spear. Those are different things, but it doesn't break down the analogy, because the analogy is a technology analogy. So the technology of a spear is old technology. It had a benefit, but now we have a different tool that does the same benefit better. And so using the spear is pointless, but the new technology, guns, were built on spears. We started with spears, turned them into arrows, and the arrows put into small little projectiles. So
Sure.
they're built on spears. If we didn't come up with spears, we wouldn't come up with
Right.
guns, which is a natural progression. So the same thing applies to religion. We start with religion, it builds social cohesion, which
Mhm.
now we can achieve with more social means, which is the same thing. It's built on the religion, just like a gun is built on a spear, but we don't need the spears anymore. They're useless.
Sure, but yes, but when you make the metaphor as objects, what you're excluding from the equation is that we're still operating with the same brains that the brains that we're using, the hardware on which our current cultural software runs, was in part shaped by religion, because religion extends back in the earliest semblance of culture is religious. Now, you mentioned the Prahas. I don't know.
Wait,
Could you
I'm not
explain?
following your relevance there to that point of what you're saying. Like, our hands are the same as they were with spears and their guns. We have the same hands. So what about this part of our brains is relevant to break down the analogy? It doesn't seem to do anything with the analogy.
Okay, so for example, you said group cohesion was one of the adaptive features of evolution,
Yes.
right? And you're saying now we don't need religion to still foster group cohesion. And I would dispute that, because I would say the way that we facilitate group cohesion, and I don't know how, and maybe we can discuss how you kind of lay the grounds for what the moral foundation for establishing group cohesion is, but like the classic Western Christian idea is that we take it for here's the premise on which we're going to build our society. Everyone is created equal, endowed by their creator inalienable rights. That's the language that's used. And then we use logic and rationality on top of that. But my point is that premise itself is not a rational claim. We didn't arrive by that. We didn't arrive to that
okay,
through rationality. We arrived to that because it's a religious idea.
Well, that's not a religious idea, but
But it is.
so I'm
Endowed by their
missing-
creator
No,
with
it's absolutely not. That predates religion in every single society. But how exactly?
Wait.
Saying,
Wait. Hold on. That claim.
yes.
How is the statement? They are endowed by their creator, not
Moral
a religious
Platonism
data.
had that. Moral Platonism had that before any religion did. There are, like, most atheists in philosophy, most academic professional atheists, or most philosophers are atheists, and most
Sure, and
philosophers
all
are
of
moral
them
realists.
okay.
So this is before religion. All of these moral terms come way before religion. Religion invented
No,
none
I
of
disagree
these.
with that. I
No,
disagree
this
with
is
that because
moral
all of
Platonism. Did moral Platonism predate all except three religions, three of the biggest religions?
the three modern religions, sure. So, wait, hold on. And this is and fair and like I said, I know of Christianity. I'm incredibly ignorant on many things. But hold on, because I want to stick to this point because whether or not moral Platonism came from religion, which to be honest, I don't know. I don't know enough to
It
say.
did not.
Yeah, but I don't necessarily buy that because
What?
you had the what do you call it? The
Greek
cult
and
of
Roman
you had the
gods.
cult of Eleusis and people engaging in old religious traditions. So hold on, I don't want to get in a historical element. Let's just take it on the face of it. We can because I'm making a claim that is independent necessarily of let's compare this tradition to this tradition. My claim is that I don't believe that you can have a functional, let's say socially cohesive culture that does not rest on faith claims. Right? Now, at my additional claim, which I'm understanding now, it's probably better to go on this other argument, is that faith claim is conditioned by religion. But unless you start from a premise that is made on faith.
Wait a minute. What is that? What is so one? I need to know what a faith claim is, but let's put that aside for a second. So my argument is like I don't even like you can have faith claims without religion as far as I can tell. Like that doesn't matter. But I don't think
that's
so. I don't think we don't need faith claims at all for anything. I use zero faith claims in my life for anything.
Yes, you
Most
do.
secular societies, well, that you can bring that up in a second, but most secular societies don't use faith at all, but still have cohesive social networks. And so,
what like name one? What's one secular society?
Atheist Community of Austin, the Freedom
Name
from Religion
a
Foundation.
country, not a foundation.
Well,
or
the point here,
a society.
so the point here is just to say that we can have secular nations that specifically reject faith. I don't know of any countries that specifically reject faith, but there are organizations that specifically reject faith and still have cohesive societies of people.
Sure. And my argument would be that here's the crux of the issue. Those societies that you're referencing have not been around long enough for selection to select against. And therefore we can't say for certain that those are as stable and foster the social cohesion that religions do, which have a proven track record of fostering cohesion because they've been around long enough for selection to act against them. Had they not fostered that social cohesion, they would have got wiped out. And I would claim that, and I brought this up earlier, when I say politics is a religion, I don't believe you can have this secular society that does not ultimately degrade down into making claims about like we're better than them or some fundamental premise that is not based on rationality or something like that. So
wait, it's supposed to be based on rationality. I don't understand what you're saying.
How?
I don't understand
let me,
any of their faith claims there.
Let's take it
to the topic.
Let's take it to like foundational moral principles. What are the premises of secular humanism that you build?
Oh, I'm not a secular humanist, so I'm the wrong person.
What are your premises? Whatever they are. Sorry.
Involuntary imposition of will is wrong. Is immoral.
What is it? Involuntary imposition of will is wrong?
Immoral, yeah.
Is immoral. And what is the rational basis for that?
Following the evidence of moral intuition, moral progress, plotting it out on a pattern graph, seeing that there's a pattern, describe the pattern with the principle that most accurately describes the pattern, use the pattern to infer a hypothesis that we can use to make predictions. It's the exact same thing we use in philosophy for moral realism.
I am going to be honest. I didn't really understand what that meant.
Science. We use plot the data, find a pattern, describe the pattern, make a prediction.
And who adjudicates between whether or not that's... Well, hold on. Wait. I asked you, what's the rational basis? Why is the... So why is it... Why should I as an individual not be willing to impose my will on someone else for my own gain in any given moment?
So moral claims in philosophy are treated like any claim. It's a truth claim. To establish a truth claim, it has to correspond to reality in some way. The way you test if something corresponds to reality is by predictions. Find a pattern, make predictions, see if they get right. And then you know who's right. And so...
Well, I don't necessarily agree with that because I think the validity of a truth claim is how much utility it provides. And prediction is one. You mentioned prediction. Prediction is a type of utility. If we can predict something we care about, that's a form of utility. But if, for example, if it's useful for me to treat other people as means to an ends and not like they have equal rights as me or whatever, and it benefits me and all my friends and all my family, then what's the rational argument against that? What's the rational argument against me taking over my neighbor's land or something like that?
It seems like you're thinking that rational argumentation has some relevance to morality. It's like it doesn't matter if there's a rational argument to convince you of anything. Whether someone is subjectively
I agree
convinced
with
is
that.
irrelevant. So like if you say it is beneficial for me and my family to believe that there is a giant gold brick beneath our house, but we tested and there isn't one, well then you're wrong. I don't care if we can convince you. Whether we can convince you, whether we give you a
Well,
rational
but
argument makes no difference.
I'm sure you're familiar with the metaphorical truth concept, right? And
Yes, and
my
it's
claim would be that
not-
religion is essentially a compendium of metaphorical truth, right? The idea that if you act as if something is true, then the question of whether or not it's true is like, it's more important how we act rather than whether or not it corresponds to reality as such. Because like, I don't know if you're conscious. So is it true that you're conscious? It's like, well, I act as if you're conscious, and I assume that you and I are inhabiting similar mental spaces, but I have no way of proving that. It's a faith claim to assume that you're conscious.
No, not in philosophy. It's you can have knowledge without certainty.
What?
But that's a separate topic. So
Hold
to
on,
go
you
back
can
to
have
this,
wait, no, hold on. You can have knowledge without certainty.
yes, it's called
Okay, I
fallible.
believe when you say, I believe that when I say a faith claim, I believe that's what I'm referring to. So I'm saying you cannot have a moral system that doesn't start with some claim that is ultimately irrational.
Wait. None of those words made sense to me. So we can have
That's fair.
knowledge without certainty. There, like, you're trying to refer to that when you say faith, that we can have knowledge that doesn't have certainty and anything. So you're saying
Knowledge,
any
hold
knowledge
on,
claim without certainty is faith?
I believe that's the definition of faith, unless I'm completely wrong here. Knowledge without certainty is faith. What's the difference between faith? What's faith to you?
A belief without evidence or insufficient evidence.
And how is that different from knowledge without certainty?
Knowledge is justified true beliefs. We have a justification.
What does
So
that mean?
it has what is it means a reason to believe the proposition is more likely true than false.
Right, and if you don't have evidence for that belief, is that not knowledge with uncertainty?
No, then it would no longer be justified. So knowledge is a justified true belief. So you need to believe something and you need to have justification. If you don't have a justification, then it's just a belief. It's not knowledge. And for knowledge, you need to be a belief, and you need justification, and it needs to be true. You need all three of those things. Without the justification, it's not knowledge. It's just a belief.
I'm not following this. I don't.
Right.
Again, and I want to focus on this point because I think this is where the disagreement is like when to the degree that Western society is functional, it's because we treat everyone with equal rights. We say, hey, it doesn't matter if someone is different from you, it doesn't matter what they are. They all deserve rights. They all deserve to be treated as if they are intrinsically valuable human beings. Right? Now,
No.
well, okay.
I mean, there's lots of societies that don't treat people
Yeah,
like that. But
and
are
I
still
would say
very
they're not
successful.
functional. Like what? What's a society that...
Like Saudi Arabia, it's very functional. It's not the most functional, but it's functional. China
Okay.
is extremely functional.
Very
not the
interesting
most
that
functional.
that the atheist is the one claiming that Saudi Arabia is a very functional
Well, functional
society.
means the people
For
aren't
individuals.
starving to death.
For
Wait,
you,
wait, wait.
from a point of view of individual well-being is what I mean.
Functional is like we're contrasting all possible governments. Though a non-functional government is where the people are starving to death. That's a non-functional government. Any government
Or
that
one
can,
that represses gay people, for example. We were talking about unjustified truth claims and knowledge without uncertainty. Yeah. I'm saying the functionality of in order to have a society that is functional from the perspective of maximizing human well-being, it has to make certain assumptions in its moral,
what do you mean by functional
matrix.
So by functional, I mean
maximizes well-being.
People are not starving to death.
That's one consideration. But if everyone is not starving to death, but they're all under a tyranny and have no rights, we're talking about maximizing well-being. I mean, do you buy the idea that there's a moral landscape and there's different peaks and valleys of well-being?
None of them maximize well-being. So what do you mean by maximizing well-being? What is, like, you need a more specific definition here.
I don't, I mean, like I assumed it was self-evident in terms of like maximizing people's rights and freedoms and capacity for meaning and social connection.
None of them do that. Like libertarians have this argument all the time that we're infringing on everyone's rights. Like, yes, we are in lots of ways. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. and there are ways in which the U.S. government oppresses people, just like there are ways that Saudi Arabia oppresses people.
Sure, but the degree of oppression is different, obviously.
Right, but that's what
Right,
I'm
so
saying.
that's what
Like,
I mean. It
you're not
max.
giving a principle of what defines a functional government. You're just giving this arbitrary, like,
Okay.
utopian definition that you think the things that get closest are the ones that are functional or something. Like, it doesn't really tell us anything of what you're
I,
saying.
f- I feel like this point is not as complex as you're making it out to be. Right? A society that treats its citizens as if they have inherent rights is, I think we can say, is generally is a more desirable society, a more morally functional. I'm using kind of words, assuming people can understand them just, on the face of it. That is better than a society that treats people as if, some people are better than others. And my point is, the ethic that all people should be treated equally is a faith claim, right? There's no what is the what is the rational? And I'll use the example that Matt Dillahunty had in his debate with Jordan Peterson. I think this gets to the crux of the issue. Is Matt Dill, and I don't know to what degree you share your beliefs with Matt Dillahunty, but the idea is
Not much.
okay, good, that's a good sign. But the idea is if you can't arrive at conclusions that I should treat all people as if they have inherent worth outside of starting with a faith claim. Because, like in Nazi Germany, the idea was, hey, it's rational for, if you're a German or an Aryan, it's rational for you to go along with all of the horrible crimes and whatnot and seize the resources of a smaller population. It's good for you, it's good for your family, and it's good for society.
There's 2 points there. One is that every academic philosophy and ethics is going to disagree with you and say that's bullshit.
Okay,
but
I completely reject that, but go ahead.
I
Is
mean,
that not, hold on, is that not an appeal to authority, I believe is the
no,
fallacy?
appeals to authority are only fallacies if they're not actual authorities. If the actual authorities in the field of ethics
Who
are
decides who
saying
the authorities are?
the people who can actually make progress in the field and understand the field the best, which is not
Sure.
you.
It's
So
not you
the
either.
academic professional philosophers in ethics use arguments and evidence and logical structures and Bayesian epistemology in order to try
Continue
and
your
assess.
point about.
Yes. So the academic philosophers use evidence, not faith, to make
Sure.
conclusions.
Okay.
And the second thing is that even if it did use faith, you can have faith without religion. Like
No, I don't believe that. I think that's a definition, and this is a
what-
definitional thing. To have a faith claim is a religious claim.
How? Those are completely separate topics. It's
And-
mostly the case that religious people use faith, but they're not. There's no logical entailment of either.
Okay, and maybe we just are operating in a completely different frame. When I hear the term faith, like religious people base their ideas on faith that the Bible is the word of God, whereas atheists base it on
Evidence.
right. That's so there's right. So
Yeah.
you can't right. And my point is you can't talk about evidence and you can't make claims about evidence without operating in a framework that is defined on faith claims, like the idea
that doesn't make sense. But I want to go back to the original question. Why do you think you can't have faith without religion? Because I understand that most religious people base their religion on faith, but it's a coincidence. There's no necessary connection.
Fair enough, and I might just honestly be definitionally confused. What's an example of a faith claim that's not religious?
Faith claim that's not religious. Well, there's many different. Most atheists around the world believe in spirituality without a god, and those are faith claims. So like ghosts, Reiki,
Okay, well,
energy, crystals.
Okay, I wouldn't differ. Well, I would argue that's just a different form of religion. I mean, hold on. Maybe it would have helped at the beginning. What is your definition of religion, out of curiosity?
An institution of beliefs set around worshiping a god of some kind.
Okay. Okay, based around a god. Okay, the problem with that definition is that if I say something, this is why I brought this up earlier. When I say something like politics is a religion for a lot of people, everyone watching understands what that means. But according to your definition, that doesn't line up. Right? Politics
that's a figurative usage, not a literal usage. And so the literal definition of the dictionary would not apply for football or politics or football.
Okay, that's an appeal to Webster's definition.
When you say hold on, language is how
wait, hold on.
Words.
Yeah, hold on. But and it's a shame we only have 45 minutes because we could have a good discussion. All language is ultimately based on a metaphorical cognition. This is George Lakoff.
What?
Hold on. So let me explain. So, for example, well, hold on, let me explain.
Could you just tell me what metaphysical cognition
Not
what that means?
metaphorical, not metaphysical. Right, which that
Okay, what
doesn't
does that
clarify
mean?
anything. It means that all of our language is ultimately, and this is a complex idea, but it's ultimately based on non-literal. How do I say this? All language is metaphorical to some degree. So, for example, we're having a debate, right?
1 + 1 = 2.
Hold on, that's mathematics, which is a different realm. But hold on,
That's a language.
well, hold on.
Like,
Let me
it's a
give you a
formal
simple
language.
example. Let me give you but mathematics. I'm talking about language, like linguistic language, like semiotics, not mathematics. Hold on. If we're having a debate, and like in a debate, you attack my ideas, and I defend my ideas, and I attack your ideas, right? That's a metaphor. And if I say, for example, like prices are rising or temperatures,
How is that a metaphor?
hold on. Because I'm not literally attacking your positions, am I? With a spear?
Right, but you're well, actually, you are attacking them because it's
I'm
a philosophical
figuratively
attack is-
attacking them.
No, literally, because
what's
attacking.
Yeah.
Because attacking doesn't mean physical attack. Attack can mean any kind of
Right, because it's
assault
figurative.
on something. Well, no. Attack as a literal word can be
I know.
an attack
Oh, this would
on
be.
ideas.
We need to have an extended
But
discussion because
I
this is
don't
interesting.
understand how this ties into the topic of the debate here. Why?
I don't understand
do you
how did it
think-
come up? How do we get to metaphor?
Topic question is how can you have or why can't you have faith without religion?
What was the example of the faith claim that was faith that was not religion? Well, because we talked about spirituality and whatnot, right? You said spirituality is not religion. Well, I would argue you haven't given your definition of. This is right. This is how we got back to it. You had given your definition of religion is a belief in a God, an institution around belief in God. And I would say the fact that people regularly use the language of politics as a religion, and everyone understands what that means, indicates that religion is something you hold sacred. Religion is something you would give your life for. Religion is something. It's not one propositional definition, right? Or religious are those beliefs you hold most sacred, right? That's an individual's religion, and you say, well, okay, that it's like. That's different from the institutional aspect of religion, which I agree with.
Okay, I'm totally lost here. So, like, if religion is the things you're going to give your life for or whatever, like those can also be.
Your religion are the beliefs that you hold most sacred, and the beliefs that you hold most sacred are not based on rationality. There's things that you take on faith.
Right, but like a
certain
political
point.
system can be purely based on rationality, and you can hold none of it sacred. It's just this is the rational rules. Like you don't need to hold any of the political system.
Like what? What's a political system that's only based on rationality?
Don't run stoplights.
I agree. That's rational. It's very. If anyone's watching, it's rational to not run stoplights. But what's the assumptions that are built into that? You shouldn't run stoplights. Why? Because it might kill someone, right?
Yeah, which is purely logical because it damages society.
Right, but this is my point about
going.
And why is all that bad? Because it's ultimately bad for the well-being of
so
the people in it.
I think I can. So there are multiple ways to assess why that's bad, and you don't need some kind of a god or religious basis to conclude it's bad. You can purely be a logical computer and say, if I want to maximize the economy's growth, or maximize this value, I want to make money. Then in order to do that, I need more people doing more stuff for longer. In order to make more people do more stuff, they need to die less. In order to die less, put in stoplights. Purely rational, you can get exactly the same results without any kind of appeal to some kind of religious gobbledygook.
Here's why I disagree with that for two reasons. Number one, the world is so complex that it's not possible to take in all of the variables that you can account for. How do we map? You can make a very sophisticated model of how do we model the economy and whatnot, but there's too much information and too many variables that there's no way to rationally compute the infinite amount of data.
You don't need to compute all of them. Why is that relevant?
You just said, hold on. Slippery. You just said that you could just rationally compute if you just had
any one factor. So I can compute any one factor that is damaging the economy and make a law to mitigate that one factor. And I don't need to consider any of the other factors.
What? That's the opposite of that's literally that is like the definition of like an awful.
So, for example,
if you make a model and you only include one variable, you exclude every other relevant variable.
Okay. I'll give you an example that was literally applied in St. Paul. In St. Paul, there was a statistic that says people are children who have a college savings account of greater than $1 are 3 times more likely to go to college. Yeah. Therefore, St. Paul implemented a policy that says all children born will be given a college bank account, $50. So they just said, here's the data.
Yeah.
I don't care about
And what
anything
happened?
else. It's working.
And you can attribute that, and you're 100% certain that it was attributed to that
I don't
policy.
need 100% certainty. It is very, very certain, but I don't need 100% certainty. But the point here is that
It's a claim of faith.
aren't.
Wow, a very religious claim of
No,
you.
you don't need faith here. The point here is that the policy was looking at data. From a data, it made an inference about a conclusion, and it said, here is the policy in order to increase the number of people who go to college. Had no religious basis here whatsoever. It's purely economical, and we don't need to
Okay.
calculate literally everything in the economy to do this. Nobody does that. Literally, if we had to do that, there would be no policies ever written by anybody. No politicians read essentially anything that they write. They're just trying to do
Sure.
things based off their intuition. You don't have to know all of the data to make a political decision. That's not how it works.
Okay. I agree, and I'm going to take it for granted that people watching this can understand why a single variable analysis of an economic policy is not, you cannot draw causal inferences from that. I don't want to argue that. Here's the deeper point. What you decide to value. You say, well, why do we care about increasing the well-being of kids in Minneapolis? It's because we believe that those kids deserve a better life. Why should you and I care about some kids in Minneapolis when you and I could, not pay our taxes for that and we could benefit independent of that? Why is that not a rational claim?
Can determine certain value statements without any faith claims whatsoever. Like evolution causes you to not like.
We've gone over this multiple
shadows.
times. I don't believe, and this does tie into the conversation about metaphorical cognition, which I'm reading right now. It's called Metaphors We Live By. It's George Lakoff. He's the founder of the field of metaphorical cognition and embodied cognition. Well, you were appealing earlier to all the philosophers and whatnot who claim to make
because it
pure
was directly
rational
related
claims.
to your claim. But what?
Sure,
what does this have to do?
and my point, and this is obviously clearly we're running into a lot of definitional barriers. Of like when you say like there are atheists who believe in spirituality and there's atheists who believe in the value of other people just because it kind of makes sense.
No, because of actual arguments and evidence, the same way we use everything in philosophy. So not religion.
Who? Man, I don't know. You say how we do it in philosophy. I'm sure there's plenty of people in philosophy you disagree with, and yet you keep referencing them as. So who's this we in philosophy that you keep appealing
all of them,
to?
all of the people I agree with and the people I disagree with. We use the same logical arguments, the same Bayesian epistemology, the same way of assessing evidence. Like we come to different conclusions, but we use the same evidence.
Really?
It's not like
Do you think that
yes.
postmodernists do the same thing?
I don't know of any postmodernists in that field.
Which field are we talking? Philosophy?
Philosophy and or ethics.
Well, then you severely underestimate the degree to which society is in danger of bad
Can you
ideas.
name one postmodernist that is an academic professor of
Sure.
ethics?
Kimberly Crenshaw is one of the most
Of
prominent.
ethics? She's not a professor of ethics.
Her work has vast implications in the field of ethics as it relates to political decisions. Does it not? Intersectionality?
What does that have to do with the academic field of ethics? That's completely irrelevant.
I feel like we're getting too into the weeds in this.
So yeah, let's go back. Why do you think you can't have faith without religion?
Again, maybe I can make a different example that doesn't require a definitional rabbit hole. People hold, like I said, values sacred, right? People orient their lives around sacred values, right? Values that they just take as like the fundamental orienting principle in their life. Do you disagree with that?
Sort of. Let's go with it.
Okay. For example,
Hold
on.
Just grant it. Give me
sure. Okay.
Therefore what? Therefore what?
Therefore, when people act on a set of beliefs they hold sacred, those actions, or at least the extreme versions of those actions, are religious. So let me clarify, because the reason I'm using this relatively broad term, and I believe and I agree with the statement that politics is a new religion, right? And I think, and you don't, that just because other people agree with me doesn't mean it's correct. So fair enough. I'm just saying that I take that as I understand what that means.
Therefore what?
Because, therefore, well, as it relates to this argument, therefore, if politics is a religion, we accept politics as a religion, then that is in line with my claim that all cultures are built on religious platforms.
No, I'm trying to figure out like do you mean by religion any value claim at all?
What do you mean a value claim? I'm saying that the beliefs that people hold most valuable, most sacred, are their religious beliefs. And here's my point. Here's why I think that definition is good and useful in the context of this argument. Religious extremism is as bad, but I would say not worse, than any form of like secular extremism. And that's because people hold their political values as sacred as their religious values. So when you make the claim like, well, atheists believe in spirituality, or they're atheists who are just political, it's like the fact that, for example, there are people who are willing, all of the worst aspects of religious extremism are also embodied by people who are quote unquote not religious. But then I think, okay, yes, they are. Yes.
So like, to give you an example, Jainism,
sure.
Religion, well, sort of, it doesn't have a
sure,
God, it's a religion.
Yes.
Extreme Jains never blow themselves up. It doesn't happen.
Yes.
Jainism is a pacifist religion. And so people who
Right.
are extremism or have extremism or are extremists will accentuate the factors of whatever they're extreme about. And so if you're extreme about a religion that's very violent, you're going to crash planes into buildings. But guess what? Secular religions don't have that. There isn't any of them.
Hold on.
None of their ideologies have that.
Okay, Marxist-Leninism is a atheist religion, right? Is an atheist belief system. We'll avoid going with the religion term right now.
No, Marxism was an ideology, and the social system of communism is what killed people. It had nothing to do with like the Marxism didn't kill people. It was the communism that killed people.
The Marxism had nothing to do with communism.
No, Marxism was like a principle that they used to try to found the communism. Marxism doesn't say anything about starve people to death or adopt.
It does say things about religion, correct?
Yes, it says things about religion, which has absolutely nothing to do with the mass murder. Like nothing in Marxism says mass murder.
Really?
People.
Okay.
Yes.
Again, this is my point about we're operating
all of the
in
examples of mass
we're taking
murder
a lot of assumptions. I assume that most people like. I agree that there are, for example, there are good ideas in Marxism that we can evaluate, but to claim that the ideology on which communism was based on did not play a fundamental role in the worst extremities of communism seems absurd to me on the face of it. But perhaps I'm operating.
The things that killed people in communism was the adoption of Lysenkoism. Lysenkoism was an alternative evolutionary view of Darwin, and when Stalin adopted Lysenkoism, he planted plants in such a way that literally caused them to die, which caused them to not have enough food, which caused millions of people to starve to death. It was not like because of Marxism; it was because they adopted bad science.
That's like saying when the Christians went on the Crusades, it wasn't because of. There's nothing in the Bible that says anything about the Crusades. It's just that they took this one wrong thing. It's like no. The Christian societies that were based on Christian doctrine.
That was
probably made bad decisions based on the flaws in that Christian doctrine.
Sure. You could say like if a Christian decided to build a bridge or something or destroy a bridge, it doesn't say to destroy a bridge in the Bible, which is completely correct. If they just made a bad scientific error that the Bible says nothing about, then yes, that scientific error would have nothing to do with the Bible. But if they do something that's literally commanded by like go out and take all of their peoples, that's a direct commandment in the Bible. You can just read the Bible and it says to do something.
Yeah,
like that.
And I believe in the Communist Manifesto, it says something to the effect of kill the bourgeoisie and their children because their children have been contaminated by bourgeoisie ideas. And you're saying that didn't have any influence on the communist
There's
extremes?
No mention in Marxism of, I don't know about that claim, but there's no mention of Marxism of Lysenkoism. The predominant killer of people in communism was the adoption of Lysenkoism, and there's nothing in Marxism about that.
I think just like your claim about we're going to look at one dimension of the Minneapolis kids and say we did this one, we changed this one factor and therefore that was the causal factor. You're somehow laying at the feet of communism. It's only Lysenkoism that caused the never mind what Marx said about killing the bourgeoisie and their children.
Was from starvation, wasn't it?
Yes. Look,
why did people starve? Was Stalin just taking their food away? Why did they starve? What caused the starvation? Was it a lack of food?
And then PF, after you answer that, we got about 4 or 5 minutes before we
Yes.
switch into the Q&A.
That's fair. That's fair. That's fair. That might be a little bit more productive. Okay, well,
Mostly
I actually think, well, but beyond that point, because I think we're just going to go on a rabbit hole there. Beyond that point, I genuinely actually think at some point, Tom, if you'd be interested, a longer discussion to kind of understand, where it's less of a debate where I have to present claims. I'm genuinely curious to understand more on your perspective, because, and I'm not saying I'm right, because you said you can have faith without religion. I'm under the assumption that a faith claim is a religious claim, but you made the point about, like, okay, there's atheists who are spiritual and stuff. It's like, okay, fair enough. That requires me then to kind of iron out, well, is spirituality just a kind of a decentralized religion type thing, which is a different claim. But clearly, I think I have done a poor job, clearly, of articulating. Well, I don't even have I haven't even finished the book yet. I got to finish the book before I can make better claims. But I think there are just some sort of assumptions that you and I have that are just different on the face of it, that we have to tease out to have a more
stronger examples. There would be, like, many scientists believe that their pet theory is going to be proven to be true. It has nothing to do with any kind of religious or spiritual.
Like Richard Dawkins in The Selfish Gene, right? E.O. Wilson,
that was correct.
who is
the Selfish Gene was correct on pretty much everything.
To some degree, there's people that dispute that who are more credible than you and I, for sure.
Not really. Like, it's a pretty basic claim. Like, I don't think he made any substantial claims.
I feel bad because I think you and I have knowledge on this, but not everyone watching does. So we're kind of just talking like assholes right now.
Well, The Selfish Gene was a book about publicly informing the populace about things that had already been discovered.
Selection at the level of the gene.
No. There were no novel things that Richard Dawkins proposed in that. He was just reiterating.
Right. He's not even a scientist. He's a journalist.
He is literally.
You're right. He has a PhD, but he's never. I don't believe.
He has published. That's part of the dissertation process. You absolutely have to publish to be in that field. But
sure. Well, E.O. Wilson, who is infinitely more credible than Richard Dawkins, accused him of being a journalist. So I'm taking that for granted. But maybe that's foolish.
He's publishing already researched, published stuff.
Right.
So it wasn't
which people
wrong.
dispute. People dispute that.
None of the stuff in his book they dispute, because it's very, very basic stuff. No,
they because people argue that group selection and multi-level selection actually have validity.
That's not contradiction to anything he said in the book. Like,
that's literally. See, this is my point. It's just you and I talking. We're not even. The audience doesn't even.
He grants.
No, that's literally the central claim. Is Richard Dawkins is on a militant crusade, you could say, for using religious language against group selection.
It's not exclusive. It's just explaining the one concept of natural selection. It's not saying all of the other ones are false. It never said that in the book ever. I don't no.
Okay.
And on that note, guys, if you would like, in either order, to say what you got going on. In fact, we have both of our debaters' links in the description below, and then your final thoughts on the subject before we move into the Q&A.
Yes. Well, ultimately, the reason I care about this topic is because I'm worried about political polarization, which is a lot of what I focus on my channel. My last video is called "Jeanette McCurdy is a Fascist." So if anyone is interested in understanding my views, they can check that out. But I believe that the religious impulse. When I say politics is like a religion, and maybe I should have phrased mine, taken my argument from that perspective. I mean that, like, you can rationally critique religion, but then ultimately what happens is because we evolved so long alongside religion that it shaped our psychology, it shaped how we think. What ends up happening is people just take their sacred beliefs away from, well, God is the ultimate highest good and the value, to, our country is the highest value, or our country is the most important thing that we should protect, or fighting for the oppressed is the most important thing we should protect. And then people act out extreme behavior as a result of those sacred beliefs, which you say, well, they're not religious because they don't appeal to a higher God. But again, I just kind of came in here assuming most people understand what people say when they say politics is a religion. And you made the point that that's a figure of speech, to which I owe people a more sophisticated explanation of why using language as a figure of speech, it's not, you can't dismiss it that simply, because all of our language is ultimately rooted in like metaphorical symbolism, like, time is money. I spent my time in this debate. Do you see what I'm saying, right? Do you see what I'm saying? Do you understand me? Do you comprehend what I'm saying, right? There's if you take every single word in the human language and trace it down to its roots, it ends up being a physical reference to a physical concept, because it's built out of our bodies. Much like the number system, base 10 is built off the number of fingers we have. Every word in every language is based upon a physical reality. So meaning like, hey, when we say prices rise, it's like, well, prices don't actually exist. How do we understand the idea that prices rise? Because we have it inbuilt in us that something rising is going up. I'm doing a terrible job of explaining it. So thanks for having me on the first time. I appreciate everyone following along as I try to explain myself, but